Hello. Hi. An Oklahoma native, in 1997, Michelle moved to Kansas City to attend the Kansas City Art Institute from 1997 to 2001. It was there her love of relief, printing, and letterpress process began. A double major in illustration and art history, her work involves block printing design. Michelle also worked and honed her skills for 5 years at Hammer Press, a Kansas City shop, which is a great place here in Kansas City that we all get to enjoy. In 2005, she started Two Tone Press in the West Bottoms district of Kansas City. After 5 years with the support of her family, Michelle was able to purchase a 2-story commercial building, and she began shaping the studio into what she has envisioned. Her sister Angie, who also frequently visited and assisted in the studio over the years, permanently moved to Kansas City to become a full-time partner in Two Tone Press. Angie's background in business became invaluable to helping the studio grow. Together, this team has designed numerous wedding invitations, posters, business cards, as well as packaging for local makers. When time allows, they create relief art prints, many hand-carved linoleum blocks, and cards for their storefront. Their aesthetic involves around a lighthearted sense of humor, as well as a great love for fantasy and sci-fi genres through bold colors and layers. She also gets inspiration from Art Nouveau and Art Deco, which she studied while an art history double major. Michelle has also taught part-time at the Nelson Atkins Museum of Art and has returned to teach at the Kansas City Art Institute using the same Vandercook press she first learned on. Michelle and Angie, along with her another printmaker, is it Annie? Ani, started the Print League KC, the back half of the studio, in 2017. It's a community kind of print shop. The Print League KC has become an educational umbrella where beginners interested in printmaking process, such as letterpress, silkscreen, and etching, can take workshops and learn more. So if you get online, you can look if you're interested in taking some of those classes. It's a great opportunity to get into a working shop. The shop also has a membership opportunities to give experienced printmakers access to equipment and space to create work. To keep the doors open, Michelle pulls in commercial work for many clients. This crosses over into the graphic design discipline and melds the arts together. Please welcome Michelle Dwyer. Thank you.
So that was quite the introduction. A lot of it was stuff that I was going to go over, so those are a lot of words, and I'm basically going to show you what that looks like. So just to give you even further background, I come from a military family. My dad was in the Army. We moved around a lot. And my mother is from South Korea. And so growing up, my sister and I, we lived in Germany and Korea, and so we moved around a lot before ending up in Oklahoma. And so when I came to Kansas City, I just really liked how the vibe of the city, the art support here. It was like a big city, small town combo that I just really loved. Places like Chicago are just too much for me. But so this was just like the balance of all the elements that I liked. And so having moved around so much, I was very happy to put down roots here in Kansas City. And so, as mentioned, I came here to go to the Kansas City Art Institute, which I really enjoyed. Moving around a lot, it's hard to find your bearings. And so when I moved here and went to the Kansas City Art Institute, I was like, here are my people. And so it felt really good to connect in a way that I'd never connected before. And so that was from 97 to 2001. And you can see this little timeline. My sister is very organized, so she put this together for me. And so the bottom, after graduating, there's, as with many students, you're kind of wayward. And so I ended up, I had interned at Hammer Press, and then I ended up working for him full time, and really got to know the process of letterpress printing. Which the whole connection with printmaking really started when I was in high school. I didn't really like drawing and gradations, and it's like I never knew when something was done, and painting, all those different colors. It's like I liked things that were very graphic and flat. And so I really fell in love with linoleum carving and block carving as early as high school. So when I went to the Art Institute, I started off in illustration because, I don't know, I thought that was more practical. But quickly I switched over to printmaking and actually did a few semesters there and worked on that Vandercook that was mentioned before finishing off in illustration. And so a lot of my work, personal work and how aesthetic, is very illustrative and image-based, mixed with like graphic design through the printmaking process. So the left picture is the West Bottoms, which is kind of an industrial part of Kansas City, if you're not familiar. Very big warehouses. So we were able to get this, myself and a couple friends, this space, which was like 5,000 square feet on the top floor of a dusty warehouse building that leaked and was very cold in the winter and hot in the summer, but it was cheap and lots of space. So I started acquiring equipment. A lot of times it's, in moving forward, it seems overwhelming to start something new, but it's all about, priorities. So it's like, instead of having a car payment, I just like took some money and paid a loan to purchase printmaking equipment instead. And so it's all about, what direction you want things to be and where you pull your resources. And so we started getting this equipment, which was very happenstance, that I decided after working at Hammer Press for so many years that I'd kind of hit a ceiling and I really wanted to do more. And so I just randomly called a friend who was going to KU, and I was like, any chance they're getting rid of stuff? And of course they're not. And but he's like, I heard about this guy in Gardner, Kansas that was wanting to sell a shop. And I called the guy, and he was shocked to get my phone call because he had only 3 days prior to that decided he was going to sell it. So it was just, he was like thinking about it, and then suddenly this random person is calling. And so I ended up buying this press, which is a Chandler and Price, that one back there, which I have a close-up later, and a bunch of type and just everything that he had. I just bought it all, and then moved it to the West Bottoms. And then from there, in 2010, was able to purchase the space which you see on the right, which undergone a whole lot of mess, which looked like this. And I really should have started a timer. I feel like I'm blabbering. This space was acquired with the help of my family. I feel like anyone that, 99% of people that are successful is, figuring out what your resources are, what your support is, and my family has really been a strong support. And so you see the building on the bottom left and the space, how it looks now after all of that mess, and which we did a lot of on our own. A lot of watching YouTube videos on how to build walls. And so it was really recent years started taking shape. And oddly, I found after the fact of buying this building was really interesting and just sort of kismet in that the bottom left is a woman named Kate Hinkle, who is the one that built the building. And so in the 1920s, she was a widow who really liked French lace. And so she started to a little laundry business out of her house because they would either throw it out when it got messed up or they would ship it to New York to be cleaned. And so she started her own business, and it grew and grew until she was able to afford to build a whole building and hire 30 women in this. And so I thought it was very unusual that in the 1920s there's this women-owned, women-run business that was started from the ground up. And so here we come in and we my sister and I revitalized this space and also turned the second floor back into an apartment, which it had been offices, but it had originally been her apartment, which is where she died. So I thought just like that connection was pretty cool. So these are the equipment that I use. This is a Chandler Price Plan Press. You can see the dates there. Cast iron. These things are beasts. They stand the test of time. That's part of what draws me to this process, is that these machines are just gears and moving parts, and I like the idea of getting grease on my fingers and then making something that looks very delicate and colorful. And so this thing has been running, chugging along for 100 years. This is the press that I use the most often because it's a little more user-friendly. It's called a Vandercook press out of Chicago. These presses were built, between over a period of like 70-ish years, I think, 1900s to 1970s. There was about 30,000 of these built until the processes sort of evolved, and then a lot of them got scrapped for metal and tossed in warehouses and things. And so of the presses that were built, those 30,000, there might be like 2,000 in existence today, which means that with this resurgence of this letterpress process, when I started, people were buying these for a couple $100s. Early on, when HammerPress started, which was early, a decade before me, and when I started, they were about $2,000, I think, is what I paid for them. If you try to get one now, if it goes on the market, you might be paying like $12,000 because they're not being built in, and people understand the value of what these machines can do. So as mentioned, a part of my studio is commercial, so we do wedding invitations that we design in-house. My sister and I bounce off of each other to create these designs. She helps me with the design side and then typography, and then if there's any illustrative parts, I do those parts. So we've done anything, if it's on paper, we can do it. And then for our own work, with there's basically a couple different elements in creating these prints. There's these hand-carved block prints. There's the actual letterpress type that you can put together. And then there's photopolymer plates, which is like a thin plastic plate that is sensitive to light. And so when it gets exposed, it hardens. So we can have negatives printed out from a digital file and then get these relief plates made. And so that really opens up what's possible. So if I do work for, sorry if I'm getting too far away. If I do work for a client, I can create a digital design so they know what to expect, and then make the plates and then actually do the printing. But personally, I love the act of carving. The style that I create, I have really simple drawings, and then just the act of carving really shapes the way that the illustration comes out. This one was fully hand-carved. I don't do this too often because this is a lot of hand-carved type. It takes a long time. So I do like to have plates made of type if it's this intense. But this is pretty fun to do. A lot of times what I'll do is what's called reductive. It's where I'll carve away from the same block, and that saves a lot of time. So this one is on a blue paper. So I carved away anywhere where I want the blue paper showing through, and then printed a yellow, which mixed into that green color. Then cut that away, and then what's left is that dark color, which you see on the left. And so that's what after I've carved and printed a couple times. So that really saves a lot of time. But it also limits the color palettes you can get. So a lot of times what I do is I'll do combinations of having separate blocks and the reductive. This is something that I've been doing the last few years, which is really fun. There's a David Bowie tribute band. I'm a huge David Bowie fan, so this was like perfect. And they invited me to do this poster for them every January. And they don't really care what it looks like, and so I get to try out different styles. Each year I try to push myself to create something interesting, and so I've collected all these photos and I keep trying to use different ones and really capture a different kind of aspect. He was all over the place, so it's kind of interesting to try all of these different styles. And so this is a good example of the combination of things that I do. Like on the top left, the whole top portion has the blue, which is reductive. So that was light blue, carving away the whites, and then doing a dark blue. And then the interior was a separate block so that I could get those orange and yellows. And then the bottom was a plated. And then you can see the bottom left, the block on the right, how the geometric pattern was actually hand carved. And just to kind of give you an idea of process, this was a fairly recent print that I did for a group show in Texas. And you can see that in the background, I did this background pattern. So I printed a whole flat color. And then that's actually textured wallpaper that I've mounted and printed. My sister used to work at Sherwin-Williams, and they had these like textured wallpaper books that she brought me. And I realized that if I could mount it and then just put a little polyurethane or something on it to protect it, that tiny relief would print. And so I was able to get these really textural patterns. And then on top, you can see the progression of the reductive block and then the handset type on the right. So this is a really good idea, a good visualization of how my process works. So this is Josephine Baker. When we had the solar eclipse, I really couldn't let that go by without making a poster. So that's this one on the left. I always try and experiment, and so the beneath, this is a crazy amount of layers on this, but one of the layers I hand rolled that loose kind of orange and yellow that went around it. And then the one on the right is just the small print. It's only about this big, but I always enjoyed it, and the title of it is Just a Sec, and it really captures that moment of, the distraction. I like playing with typography a lot, trying to figure out how to make some really interesting text. And then this is just kind of a smattering of images. There's my sister and I in the middle. So that's just kind of an overview of the two-tone press side of the shop. Let's see, we started at 3:30. Am I going too far? And so just real quick, I'm just going to run through. And so Print someone mentioned, was mentioned that we started, so this is the three of us that started the community print shop. This is housed in the back half of my studio. And so this is our workshops. Someone feel free to come up here and stop me. And one of the things that we do also is Lego printing, which was a really fun process of actually utilizing Legos. And this has been something that's ongoing in doing workshops for people, because it's a really easy way to introduce people to letterpress printing without having to mess with tiny type that falls apart. We have this nice modular base that you can just make whatever designs you want. So we'd be able to do this with 3- and 5-year-olds on up to adults, and it's a lot of fun. And if I don't have enough on my plate, we also have a gallery next door that we started in this shop. So we, with the help of my family, also purchased the building next door. And so this was us going at this again, and then the gallery on the right. So that's kind of everything in a nutshell, with the progression of where I started, where we're going, and all the different elements, with a little visualization of my process.
Thank you, Michelle. That was great. So it is my pleasure. My name's Mark, by the way. Hi, everybody. It's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. My pleasure and honor to introduce our next speaker. Sydney Penner and I have, we go way back. We both started teaching here the same year, a long time ago. I mean, it was like 20 years ago. But we were about 6 or so when we started, I think. So that explains our youthful looks here. We both started in 2001. Sydney is a passionate individual. She's a passionate metalsmith. She's a passionate artist, educator, passionate mom, and she's just an all-around, she's a great colleague, right? So that I have a lot of respect for Sydney. Sydney's art practice is a delicate balance of all of those different aspects. Her every aspect of those different tasks that I just mentioned are part of what she does. Everything okay? Sydney's conceptual metalwork honors the traditions of metalsmithing and utilizes a diversity of techniques and materials. Her metal body adornment and jewelry has been featured in fashion magazines nationally and internationally, such as The Pitch, Obvious, Volition magazines LA, Mouvier Paris, NPR, Elux magazine London, and on and on and on. And her jewelry is represented by the Reuben Sanders Gallery. Sydney's also very active in local art events, fashion shows, and workshops, and she founded her own company, Eno Metalworks, in 2018. Sydney got her MFA at Syracuse University and her BFA from University of Kansas. She's worked in New York City for The Complete Sculptor and at Margot Manhattan Jewelry in Soho. Presently, she's an associate professor here at JCCC, teaching metalsmithing and silversmithing courses. In fact, the program we have today probably wouldn't exist if it weren't for Sydney. So I think she's a pretty amazing person. So please join me in welcoming Sydney Penner.
Having me and inviting me here. My name is Sydney Penner, and I'm a metalsmith artist, and obviously been a teacher here at Johnson County Community College for about 22 years, a little bit over. For me, I was always making art, and it was a conversation that Mark Howardin and I had the other day. And I didn't know or think that that was something that I could do when you grew up. You know, it was something that I just did. It was natural to me. And then it was like, well, what are you going to do when you grow up, and making those decisions? And I realized that I could just keep being me and making art. And so this first image is, for me, my first documented abstract art and expressionism piece. It was a painting I did in kindergarten, and the story behind this, I think that a picture speaks 1,000 words, and everything is a visual story or narrative that's shaped by our environment and who we are, and we're a unique fingerprint in this world. And so my parents, I have a twin sister, and my parents came to the open house in kindergarten, and they saw this work, and they said, "This is a very disturbed child." And they didn't know, they're like, "Oh, we don't know I wonder whose parents that child is." And it was them. Because I go, Mommy, come on up, and here's my artwork. And I don't think they realized that this is a picture of an airplane crash. And they didn't realize that they must have somehow allowed me to watch the airport 1975 or 1976 versions, and so I was terrified about airplane crashes. And so this actually was my expressionistic piece, documenting the horrific experiences of airplane crashes. I did think I was going to be a painter. I went to KU and didn't know what fields of art I could go into, and I was always in the paint and attacking the canvas and realizing, and then I found metals and jewelry smithing course my sophomore summer. And it was just, everything clicked. My world made sense. And so some of the pieces I did way back in graduate school, this was, again, about things that shaped my life. And this was one of my father's rings from when he was a kid. In 1947, there was a Kix cereal box promotion ring that they could purchase, and this was the Lone Ranger atomic bomb ring from 1947. And what I was fascinated by was the fact that it had this secret compartment that you could have secret messages in. And I love the idea of that secret space or enclosed space. And I liked the idea, and so inside I love the idea of objects right away. There's sort of that ephemeral slice of agate on the top. And I was always influenced by writing a little bit and poetry. And then there's the secret, you can see at the bottom right, there's the secret compartment where you could put things in. So secret space, and the idea of the intimacy with the body, with jewelry. I do think of them as miniature sculptures for the body. So it was important to me to have every side have a common, motif or design that related to the whole. Inside is black sand from Hawaii. This little window in front, and there was these crushed pearls that were my father's mother's pearls that were natural pearls. And so this window, and then some, when I used to go running along the trail in Lawrence, these rocks. So this was about place and time and memory and objects for me. But the one cool thing about the Lone Ranger atomic bomb ring is you can see the time was right after World War II. And there was this obsession, actually probably after the bomb of Hiroshima and all, that with nuclear power. And they actually said it was safe, but there were these, it was called I think it's called a stenoneroscope or something, and it would actually give scintillations. You'd look inside, you'd open off the red cap, and you'd look inside, and it would have a lens, and you could see radioactive isotopes that were completely safe, flashing for the ring. I think it only lasted about 170 days. But this was one of the most best-selling collectible items out there. It was the biggest crave. This was another piece I did in graduate school, and I feel that people can be inspired by so many things in their environment, and it doesn't have to be other people's artwork. It can be in the form of writing. And one of the books was The Unbearable Lightness of Being by Milan Kundera. And it really spoke to me in the opening of the book about what kind of person you are. Are you a person that's, are you there to stay and fight, or are you flight? And I always was the one that stays and fights. And I had to learn when I hit the brick wall. And so this was a piece that was very symbolic to me about knowing when to flee or to fly or to soar, and learning to know when to do that was important. And so this was actually 50 pounds of polyester resin that I poured, and inside, encapsulated, much like the Victorians did, was to freeze or frozen time are these wings that are supposed to fly me off and allow me to escape, right? And well, that wasn't gonna work because, I'm stubborn and I'm gonna always keep fighting for something even though I've hit the brick wall. So then there's these little baby carriage wheels, and then there's these cast aluminum big boy feet that were from a flea market in Syracuse. And there, of course, it's not pretty, but I am fleeing or flying, I don't know, fleeing the scene with these feet are all in pandemonium, trying in all directions to help me to escape the situation I must leave. So I feel that the power of words can define a person or box them in. I also really want to unite concept with the traditions of metalsmithing. So this was about 250 drilled holes and hand-cut piercings. So very meticulous. I feel that we're a world that's impatient and we want things now, sort of like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, where, is it Veruca Salt? She wants it now. And I think that it instills in someone the idea of patience and the journey and the feeling of accomplishment with working with your hands very meticulously. And the power of words can really harm a person, I think. And I feel that it was very important for me to integrate some words into my work. And so this was actually one of my mother's plastic antique doily patterns on a placemat, and so I incorporated that with the words fragile, and these crowns have been worn. And this is sterling silver. This is another crown it's called a la mode, and I think of, the American apple pie a la mode. We always add on more, and the idea of a la mode is a French word meaning in style or in fashion. And this is, the tray it's on is actually, the crown is designed off of the tray that's a discarded, vintage silver tray that was at a thrift store. And so you can buy these things for just a few dollars, and I feel like we just are so excessive, but we've lost the idea of ritual and ceremony in our lives. But then those things can be very constricting too. But people seek to have those things, and then, it's out of fashion and discarded, and so it's the idea of recycling and bringing new ceremonial and ritual and breathing new life into old objects. And so this is a sterling silver crown. I wire stamped and pierced the words out and then echoed the design of the tray underneath. So, and this one, so I'm dating myself, but my childhood was when there was shag carpet. And so this is the red shag dunce cap. And then it's actually perforated aluminum, and I did some stitching, and I had a twin sister, and we're polar opposites, and she was a reader, and I was a running around, active, creative doer of arts and creating environments in my basements, and so I fell behind in reading. And so when I went into second grade, they wanted to ship me off to a special school, and because I just didn't care about reading. And then I started to really care about reading when I was in the lowest reading group. And so this was just kind of how the system made me feel, like I really was a dummy. And I knew I wasn't, and then after that I was like, oh no, we're not gonna ever have this happen again. So this is a sort of a offshoot of those memories and all that. This piece is obviously called Fluff, and this is about just empty space in people and superficiality, and just to be power of words, and it's this faux fur, of course. So I like the idea of mixed media and materials in my work, hard versus soft. And this is a more modern looking piece. I was faced with some tragedy, and I really just delved into the idea of the cycles of life in my work and patterns, the physical realm versus sort of the transformational or spiritual realm. And again, elements of my childhood. I learned about death when I was really little. I'm maybe 4 years old or maybe even younger. And my Aunt Shirley bought me, she didn't buy me a caterpillar. I mean, she gave us, my twin sister and I, a fuzzy wuzzy caterpillar. And we thought we'd be good mothers and give the little critter a bath. And that didn't work out so well. And we were just besides ourselves, crying and shattered, and so that was just my first moment of realizing about this. And I have the idea of the caterpillar, the quiet workings of the caterpillar, and then that beautiful transformation. But I think most of the time it's a caterpillar, and then it has a short life in that transformative higher state. So the weeping willow was something that also was in my backyard, and my dad had planted it, and it just is such a beautiful image. And the caterpillars, one of the main environments when I do the research on my subject matter is to unite the whole piece into this environment that, so weeping willows and caterpillars, they like each other, so. Well, maybe the weeping willow doesn't, but. This was a piece, the Venus piece. So I was really inspired by Botticelli's Venus, and then there is the idea of found objects. And the found objects if you see that silver-like element that's riveted on, that's supposed to represent the tree of life and the idea of the branches growing upward to sort of a higher spiritual self that we're all here, hopefully here to do, to evolve, to learn, to grow, to experience. The fern leaves are one of the oldest plant life forms on the earth. And then there is a cast bronze seed form that has pearls in it, and that's a lotus center, and it's obviously the idea of restoration, healing, and rebirth. And then obviously with women, we are about the Venus and about the body and rebirth ourselves, or birth. So this is a body piece, and then the fern leaves wrap around the back and hook. So from all views, it isn't like just chain. I'm thinking about the visual from all sides of the body. So I did do a lot of jewelry as well. So this piece, I'll find these old antique spoons and stuff. So this is called Casa de la Guadalajara. So it was just a souvenir spoon I found at a thrift store. And I did sort of like a modern Matisse side. I cut the other side of the spoon off and flattened it and soldered some other things on. And I love taking old porcelain and dishes and whatnot, and I crushed them and then bezel set them and cast them in different elements to make these little neck pieces, or not small neck pieces. This one is called Blossom Arch. I took antique silverware and chopped it up and made these arches. I like to do a lot of centrifugal casting, and I made those little blossom shapes. And then the center part right above the glass piece is just hand cut out of some antique silver. And the glass piece is actually, I dug up in New Mexico. It's from a jailhouse, and I got to dig up some old glass from the area. Just some samples of mold making and casting. Pretty much it's the same concepts in miniature as what is done in sculpture. So there's that, and there's a centrifugal casting machine that I do use a lot of. And this is the Song of the Cicada, yet another Cycles of Life piece in the series. When we were little, it kind of grossed me out, but my friend we'd wear a cicada shell all over, like on our clothing and stuff, and I'd do it because she was doing it. I didn't want to look kind of like, but it was kind of gross but cool. And so I love the cicadas. I love the idea of the childhood. I mean, that's just something here that's in Kansas City. And I love capturing, like hearing the cicadas. It just reminds me of my childhood. And so the branch work is all done by hand. I didn't cast branches. I actually made them from scratch. And then you can see some of the different parts. From the little pink keys are skate keys, and then I just kind of reconstituted them and added extra key loops on, a piece of agate and all of that there. And then you can see the silver maple leaf or seed that you think of the helicopters that spin off the silver maple trees. That's again another piece of childhood for me. That's just the most beautiful thing. There it is finished, the Indie Goddess. So you can see there's another piece of a souvenir spoon, the skate keys. I did these winged elements and the silver maple seed at the bottom. Birds of Paradise, there was a thrift store, these little German Bakelite little miniatures, and so I molded them. I also incorporated I cut off the elements off of an antique bowl, silver bowl, and then molded them and cast in silver and created this ornate, almost very decadent looking sterling silver neck piece. So this is actually inspired by, I met Calvin Arsenia at Casey Artists Inc. For the Entrepreneur Program in 2015. And one of his songs was called Cardiac. And so you can see all the elements. This is all hand-cut, just recycled elements from thrift store antiques. And so I cut, riveted, except I did etch the bronze heart in the center, and it wraps up around into the antique silver. And so you can see all the elements. I love the idea of gauntlets or body armor. And these were actually made for the runway. I think of the idea of body armor, which is where I want to go next, more body armor and gauntlets, the idea of protection and beauty and craft. And then I love the claws. That was actually like a small dish, and I just did like pizza slices out of it and then rolled and curled them, and people go crazy about the claws. So this, what I do love about wearable body and adornment is the minute someone puts it on, they're taken to a new place. It's just a special thing I get to see every time someone puts a crown on. But also, this was a collaborative works I did with Chris Dawn and Calvin Arsenia and Tim Pott, and we did a photography session, and basically, it was just like the pieces come to life in a new way. They get a new personality every time a jewelry piece is worn or a crown is worn by a different individual, dressing them up. There are just so many reinterpretations of wearable art and jewelry and adornment, and it takes on its own new life every time. So here's, again, the Wicked Witch of the West, and Dorothy, and being Kansas native. That question, I always thought that was a really great question. Are you a good witch? And I feel like I want to ask people that a lot nowadays. Like, I don't know, are you a good witch or a bad witch? Because I can't tell right away. So these were just, again, really wonderful photographs and interpretations. This crown is called the tacky crown, and it's completely made out of upholstery tacks. And so I love the idea of these just everyday objects, becoming like this adorned, beautiful crown. And it's sort of ironic. I like the play of the pun of it and the irony of it. And if you see, here's the back. And it does actually have letter stamped and soldered TACKY across a few of the upholstery tacks. And then there's a nickel backplate. And I love the idea of the dangerousness, or the idea of it's spiky and pretty, but and the idea you're wearing a crown that's actually just tacky. It's upholstery tack. So this is Bo Flores' photography. He took some of the crowns and reinterpreted them with Dias de los Muertos. And this was a piece. Several images got published. And so this was actually, the gauntlets are actually chandelier elements that I chopped up. And then the crown forms and the neck piece and earrings is actually like just thin brass decorative stripping that I cut and riveted together. Because if you actually heat metal, it would discolor it to make the copper content come out, which is 90% copper in a lot of the brasses and bronzes. And so you'd have this pinkish color to clean off. So I did everything cold connection. Whoops. This piece is called Makuta. It was in West 18th Fashion Show, Sweet 16. It was a series of work, and it's nickel. I think there's like 65 solder joints on this, and then shark's teeth. And this was inspired by Grace Jones, the idea of her headdress pieces, and also one of the collaborative people in the Seance collection, Phil Kepapone. He's from his family, his mother's side of the family's from Laos, and so Makuta means, crown or headdress. Here's a bit from the West 18th Fashion Show. I think the catsuit piece, those are actually Brazilian knives that I cut up to make this like sternum rib cage piece. and choker piece. And then I did kind of like Mad Max, so I did some metal shin guards to go with it, couldn't help. And then the Crown of Thorns piece was in the series as well. And I think I was up till like 4 a.m. the day of the show, and it was a painful piece to make. And then Johnny Cash's Hurt came on, and the Pixies' Where Is My Mind came on as I was finishing it. I couldn't have asked for anything better if you don't know those bands. But it was quite surreal, and so the Crown of Thorns came last. This was for a new body of work that I did for West 18th Fashion Show 2 years later in 2018. This is a tower crown based off of chandeliers. It has the antique glass. And again, just that new life that comes about when wearing it and on the runway. And you can see my inspiration was the synagogue lamps and lights and chandeliers. This was another piece. I was inspired. My father raised us on musicals and Fred Astaire, Top Hat, the song The Top Hat. And so I made a crystal and red brass top hat to be worn. This was a later piece I did. I love the idea of, again, the gauntlets and the Star of David, exploring my Jewish origins and heritage. And I love, again, the found objects. And this was etched and then cut up objects, and this is what it came from. Right? I mean, it's so much beauty in these discardable objects. I mean, bath accessories, and I just, so this Armaloo is actually basically, it's like a gold gilded copper and tin or zinc alloy that will look faux gold. But look at this ornate decadence of the Hollywood style. This is a fan crown. It got on NPR as one of the most popular played albums with Calvin Arsenia. And I made the little Poseidon's hook too, little hairpin. Workshops and teaching are just such a big part of my life. I established Eno Metalworks, and I'm in a community partner with the Girl Scouts, and I just love teaching and having that come to life. I have my own studio here close by in Kansas City, Mission. And I did get a grant. I was really excited, a partnership with Open Spaces, and I worked with teens. I really wanted to focus on younger people that are always plugged in to their phones. But the minute we got torches out and we're casting metal, those phones went down. They loved the fly glasses that were the Shade 5. They look like flies when you wear them, so they liked that. And we were casting with community youth and teens in Kansas City for 9 weeks. And this is some of my newer work, and this is almost it. This new work is about ideas of masks and protection, and we've all been, facing that. A little bit, a hint of the crown at the top. I'm incorporating the evil eye, the idea of scaring off and fending off negative forces and energy and glares from others, protective qualities, and the idea of sacred geometry. And this is the flower of life geometry. And there's the basic elements and templates of our life and universe are based off of these basic platonic solids that are in everything from energy movement, the structures of our cells and everything in the universe. So it's really exciting for me to work with this. I cut out about 200 little evil eyes, though, so I think I'm protected. This is the one of the last ones, so here's another piece of sacred geometry. And one of the other is a tetrahedron, which is like the Star of David, and that's one of the other ones I want to work with soon, is the interlocking. It's almost yin-yang, the upside-down equilateral triangles. This was etched and then patina, so it's a resist, and then a chemical eats away. There's other ways to etch. And then you have this raised decorative surface. And this is the last one, an evil eye with a grid pattern. And I do love sort of its intense presence. And that is all.
So we have time to take some questions now. Yeah. Actually, there's a question. I have a question for both of you. I'm really intrigued by both the presentations, and I would like to hear you both maybe talk a bit more about the role of the artist's hand in the work. Michelle, with the hand cut carved type and the imagery, and it has a certain quality that the letterpress it's very different. And then Sydney, I think in several ways the same thing, where you're hand cutting things out. There's a certain quality to that, and it's not digitally reproduced, or even in the mold making, you're kind of hand making some stuff that you could have made molds of. And so I'm curious to see or hear how you think of the role of the artist's hand.
For me, the artist's hand, I mean, I feel like we're just, one of the earliest parts of development for the brain is touch. And to have that disconnection with materials, for me, I just can't do it. But I do love new technology, and I am trying to slowly incorporate that in the work. But there's just something, it's so healing, and I feel of it like it's almost art therapy when I see my students or I'm just lost in the work. I never want to come back out. And if you can find that place, it's a very powerful place. And the history of technique, I think of all the people that have, through ancient times to now, that have worked with their hands. And I tell my students, you don't need all the fancy stuff. You just need head, heart, and hand to create beautiful work. And you need to have both technique, the passion, and the concepts or thoughts to do it. And so I can't remove myself from the techniques, and I'm in love with the techniques. And I think that was prevalent with you.
Sometimes it's hard for me to, when I'm working with people, to show them that they want to see like the full piece sometimes, if it's very illustrative, and it just doesn't have the same life when I work purely digitally. Like there's just, when I translate it into physically carving, physically mixing ink and printing and pressing into paper, there's just so much life in the print itself that is just not replicable digitally. And so I think that's what made letterpress this resurgence of this process, because people were, having these digital prints, and they could feel and see the tactile quality of this different type of printing. So I think it's just kind of integral in the way it looks.
You're great, thank you.
I'm sorry if we're hard to hear. We're having some mic issue, but anybody who's in the online audience, if you can hear us, feel free to type in questions and I will read them aloud. So,
Any other questions from here?
If you could go back in time, how would you get your parents to deal with the artistic person that you are? And the reason I ask that is I teach in the school system, and I was an artist growing up. My parents didn't understand me. They thought I was crazy. I have a couple of students that are very artistic. They don't function like normal students. They have to be in the mood to do work. I understand this because I went through that, but how do you deal with parents that might not be artistic minded to get them into what you're getting into? Because obviously it turned out good to you. So how would you, is there any tips you could give to somebody if you went back in time?
That happened
like, Dad, I'm artistic.
Well, I was actually very fortunate, but now as an educator and a mentor, I think that it would be important to involve the parents or contact them and reach out to them, and if you can, if they'll be responsive, to just showing them how that child or youth is prospering, and through the arts, you know, showing the results of that, and showing them that this is really great. You know, you have to tell them that it's great work, and you'd like to see more of it, and maybe that plants the seed in them to say, well, okay, I'm going to let them keep doing this. I think that might be the responsibility of an educator, is to put that front and foremost, and to tailor that, and maybe try to involve the arts in the other educational aspects of their schooling, you know. So, Michelle.
It's funny that you asked that, because to this day, occasionally my mom will make comments about how I should have been a doctor. But that being said, she has been very supportive from the beginning in her own way, because she knew of how hard of a worker I was. So she didn't really worry too much, because, you know, it's gonna, being a hard worker, like, the path, and this has really been working, how I kind of approach my whole life, is that, you know, you just move towards a goal, and then more than likely, it doesn't look the way that you want it to, so then you have to pivot. And so it's, you know, learning how to move forward. And so it doesn't matter what you're doing. And so as long as you have that self-motivation and hard work ethic, like, I don't think there's anything to worry about, just because you're gonna figure it out along the way. I don't know if that's helpful, but yeah, it's just, you know, I've always been really confident about what I'm doing. You know, she still doesn't quite understand, but she knows that I'm a hard worker, and that I'm gonna do whatever it takes to keep moving forward.
Someone asked online, how do you stay inspired when the world tries to snuff out creativity and innovation?
That's an interesting question.
So someone asked on the computer how the artists stay inspired when the world tries to snuff out your creativity and innovation.
I mean, I find inspiration from other people. You know, I try to surround myself with other creative minds that, and you know, it's like you're feeding off of that energy. And so if you know, even with everything going on, you know, finding ways to stay connected with people is just really important, I think.
I feel like creating art resets me if I'm feeling overwhelmed, and that I can channel, again, like the evil eye, that negative energy, and make it a positive, to put that energy out there. And it is about community and connection, and it can be very isolating, I know, for people that have been going through so much, and it's that connection that is what can maybe help or save people. So I think just you have to channel it, and it's not the easiest thing to do.
I mean, it's all about momentum. It's, you know, which has been really difficult in the time that we've had, because at least, you know, definitely in my experience, it's like I had so much momentum built up before 2020, and then it's just sort of like just came to a halt, and it's still, you know, scrambling to try to like regain that is very difficult. But getting out there, you know, going to gallery shows, going to talks, seeing things, reading things, looking at things. If you don't know what you're doing, at least look at what other people are doing, and then just seeing how other people are, you know, growing, like, I think is just will give you the energy to grow yourself.
I'm struck on both of your presentations of how much your excitement has been enhanced because there are organizations that are putting you together with different sorts of people. And I think Kansas City has grown in that way. There are organizations that are trying to help artists do things with other people, with musicians or with, you know, someone else who is, they might not ordinarily connect with. Do you feel that way yourself?
I mean, as you saw in there, you know, I mean, collaboration is always a wonderful thing, you know, to help expand yourself and connect with people.
Yeah, I'm kind of a person that I was very surprised. Like every collaboration I've done, it just was people starting talking together, and that I didn't really even know at first. Like me for doing the runway, I never imagined my stuff on the runway or making big works for the runway, and it just made so much sense to bring, you know, instead of metal and jewelry not on the body in boxes. And so I was always like, yeah, let's do it. And then I always found people that were like, yeah, they want to talk about it, but they didn't end up following through or doing it. And it was very frustrating. And then you find people, and I mean, I can't say for anywhere else. I lived in New York City, but I was lonely in around 7 million people. And so, and I'd find other lonely people, but there was a disconnect, and it was a little bit harder world. But here, I feel like people put in the hard work and want to make things happen, and it launches them into their careers. Like, just keep on the path. It's a slow journey, and then you look back and go, wow, that's where I came from, and I would be so shocked to see where I am now, you know, so.
You know, with the, working with the runway, your work in particular with the jewelry, as it became more a part of the entire body rather than something that adorned the neck, I thought that was incredible.
Oh, thank you.
And it, you know, the work, it appeared to me anyway that it just took it so much further, that collaboration.
So the comment is that as you moved up towards working on the works that are on the runway, you were incorporating more of the body rather than just around the head and face and neck?
Yes, well, I had already been making, I had made about 10 crowns, and someone came to me and asked if they could use the crowns for the Kansas City Fashion Week. So I did that first, and then I just made more, and I just started to think, well, on the runway, they're not going to, okay, one little crown. I want it to be a full melding of fashion and clothing with the jewelry as an intricate part. It's a little tiny detail. So how do you see that if someone's walking across the runway? If you're way over there, you have to make full more body integration. So, yeah, thank you.
Give you a chance to respond to the previous question about collaborations. Kansas City providing opportunities to collaborate and reach out to people that you might not otherwise have worked with?
I mean, that's part of the reason I started Print League, was that I was in my studio by myself all the time, and I wanted to connect with the community in a different way. And so we started our community print shop, and it just brought a whole new life to the shop, and I was able to interact with people in a different way that I hadn't before, through the workshops and seeing other people getting excited about the processes, and then also connecting people with the gallery and helping them fulfill their visions. And so it's been nice to kind of, you know, be able to be out in the community more.
Well, I'm sorry that we've run long, and thank you so much for staying with us, and thank you so much for your presentation today.